I'm 32M, and a few weeks ago, I attended what was supposed to be the biggest wedding in our family's recent history. My cousin Ethan 30M was marrying his longtime girlfriend Sarah 28 Fuff, and everyone was beyond excited. They had been together for 6 years, and if you asked anyone in our family, they were the perfect couple. The kind that always posted picture-perfect vacation photos, held hands at every family event, and seemed completely in sync. The wedding was set at this beautiful lakeside venue, the kind you only see in wedding magazines: open-air ceremony, fairy lights everywhere, expensive decor. Hundreds of guests showed up, including a mix of family, old friends, and co-workers. The whole weekend was planned out to perfection. A welcome dinner, the ceremony, the grand reception, and even an after-party. Ethan's parents had spent a fortune making sure their only son's wedding would be unforgettable. I've always been close to Ethan. We grew up like brothers, so when he first introduced Sarah to the family, I supported their relationship 100%. Sarah was charming, good at making people like her. And for years, no one had a single bad thing to say about her. Ethan worshipped the ground she walked on. Everything seemed normal, right up until the rehearsal dinner the night before the wedding. That's when things started feeling off. At the rehearsal dinner, Ethan made a surprise announcement. Instead of his younger brother giving the best man speech, his lifelong best friend Mike would be stepping in. This wasn't a huge shock. Mike and Ethan had been best friends since they were kids, but the last-minute switch caught some people off guard. The moment Ethan made that announcement, the vibe at our table changed. Sarah's friends exchanged weird glances, whispering to each other, while her maid of honor suddenly looked pale. Mike, on the other hand, didn't look like someone excited to be giving a speech at his best friend's wedding. He was on edge, drinking way more than usual, barely talking to anyone. I remember watching him down a whiskey, his leg bouncing under the table like he was holding in something big. Even when I tried making small talk, he just gave short answers, barely looking up from his drink. That was the first red flag. The next morning, everyone was running around getting ready. Hair, makeup, photos. It was chaos, but the good kind. Ethan was nervous but happy. Sarah was smiling, laughing with her bridesmaids. Everything seemed perfect until I spotted Mike again. He was already drinking. It wasn't even noon, and he looked worse than the night before. Tired, tense, like he hadn't slept. I wasn't the only one who noticed. A few of Ethan's other friends tried joking with him, but he wasn't in the mood. The ceremony went smoothly. Vows exchanged, rings placed, kisses sealed. People cheered, and the couple looked genuinely happy. Maybe I was just overthinking things. Then came the reception. Dinner had just finished, and it was time for the speeches. Ethan's dad spoke first, then Sarah's parents. Everything was emotional, sweet, exactly what you'd expect. Then Mike took the microphone. He had already tried to talk to Ethan privately a few days before, but Ethan had brushed off his concerns. He couldn't let his best friend walk into a disaster. At first, his speech started off like any other, talking about how he and Ethan had been best friends since they were kids, how he always knew Ethan would find someone special, how Sarah had made his best friend the happiest guy in the world. But then his tone shifted. He hesitated, gripping the microphone tighter. His voice wavered, like he was struggling with something. People started shifting in their seats. Then he said something that made the entire room go silent. Some things are just too big to keep quiet. Some things are too wrong to ignore. Sarah's smile vanished instantly. Her whole body stiffened. Across the room, I saw her maid of honor freeze, her face going pale. Sarah shot a look toward someone at her table, like she was silently pleading for them to do something. Mike's voice got stronger. I tried to keep this between us. I told Sarah to come clean. I told Ethan to be careful. But now, I can't stand here and pretend I don't know what Sarah's been doing behind Ethan's back. The sound of silverware dropping, glasses clinking. People gasped, whispered, turned to each other in shock. Sarah's father jumped up from his seat, looking like he was about to intervene. But Mike kept going. She's been cheating on Ethan for 2 years, and the worst part, the guy she's been sneaking around with is here, at this wedding. For a second, no one moved. It was like time had stopped. Ethan, who had been smiling just moments before, now looked like he had been punched in the stomach. Then the room exploded into chaos. People gasped, chairs scraped against the floor. Sarah shot up from her seat, her mouth opening like she was about to deny it, but no words came out. Ethan turned to Mike, his voice low but furious. Who? And that's when Mike pointed, right at Brandon. Brandon, the husband of Sarah's maid of honor. Brandon, who was now sitting there frozen, looking like he wanted to sink into the floor. Jessica, Brandon's wife, whipped her head around to look at her husband. Her face went from confusion to realization to sheer fury in seconds. Ethan's face was unreadable, but his hands clenched into fists. Sarah finally found her voice, but it came out as a weak, frantic whisper. Ethan, he didn't even let her finish. Without a word, he reached up, took off his wedding ring, and threw it on the table. And just like that, the wedding was over. The night that was supposed to be a celebration had turned into a complete disaster, and none of us were ready for what came next. The moment Mike pointed at Brandon, the entire room erupted. Chairs scraped against the floor. Someone knocked over a glass. Gasps and whispers spread like wildfire as guests turned toward Brandon, who looked like he had just been sentenced to death. His face went pale, his jaw clenched, and he opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Across the table, his wife, Jessica, sat frozen, her eyes darting between him and Sarah like she was trying to put together a puzzle that didn't make sense, until it suddenly did. Sarah moved first. She lunged toward Mike, reaching for the microphone, but he yanked it back before she could grab it. Her voice cracked as she tried to stop him, but it was too late. The damage was done. She turned to Ethan, reaching for his arm, trying to explain, but Ethan stepped back like her touch burned him. His face was unreadable, but his breathing had changed, deep, heavy, like he was trying to hold something in. Jessica's chair scraped loudly against the floor as she stood up. For a second, she didn't say anything. Then, without warning, she picked up her glass and hurled the drink straight into Sarah's face. It hit her square on, soaking her hair and wedding dress. More gasps. Someone muttered, "Oh, she asterisk." Sarah wiped at her face, but before she could react, Jessica spoke, her voice shaking. 2 years. That was all she managed to get out before her throat closed up, and she turned toward Brandon instead. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. He reached for her arm, but she yanked away, stepping back like she couldn't stand being near him. Her hands trembled as she pointed at Sarah, at the woman who was supposed to be her friend, who had smiled in her face, hugged her, given her marriage advice, all while sleeping with her husband. Brandon finally found his voice, but all that came out was a pathetic, "It's not what it looks like." A bad choice of words. Jessica let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head before turning to the crowd, her voice rising. "I'm filing for divorce." Then she stormed out, shoving past stunned guests. Someone at her table hesitated, glancing at Brandon like they were debating whether to go after him or stay for the show. Ethan still hadn't moved. He was just staring at Sarah, his hands clenched into fists. She tried again, stepping forward, her voice desperate, but he cut her off before she could get a full sentence out. He reached up, pulled off his wedding ring, and threw it onto the table between them. It clattered against a plate, rolling before stopping near the edge. Sarah's father stood up, his face flushed, trying to get control of the situation. His voice boomed through the room as he tried to calm everyone down, insisting this wasn't the time or place. Sarah's mother was already in tears, face buried in her hands. A few of Sarah's friends whispered among themselves, eyes darting toward the exit like they wanted to be anywhere but here. Ethan finally spoke, his voice eerily calm. "The wedding is over." Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. The silence that followed was deafening. The only sound was the faint clinking of glasses as someone at the bar tried to set their drink down quietly. Then, as if on cue, guests began murmuring amongst themselves. A few stood up, some awkwardly shifting in their seats, while others exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what to do next. Sarah collapsed into a chair, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking. Her father crouched next to her, speaking in hushed tones, while her mother rubbed her back. A few of her bridesmaids hesitated, not sure whether to comfort her or pretend they didn't know her. Someone tried to restart the music, but the DJ must have sensed the mood because it cut off almost immediately. Mike still had the microphone in his hand. He looked around then, with a slight shrug, let it drop onto the floor with a loud thud before walking off. A few of Ethan's friends followed him out, shaking their heads and murmuring among themselves. I stood there for a moment, stuck between going after Ethan or staying to watch the aftermath. Sarah's father had switched from comforting to damage control, desperately trying to speak with Ethan's parents. Ethan's mother refused to even look in his direction. She was already gathering her things, face cold as stone, acting like this was a business meeting that had just gone south. Ethan's dad looked furious, his hands clenched at his sides, jaw tight. Sarah stood frozen for a moment, then took a deep breath and walked toward Ethan, trying to compose herself. "Ethan, please, let's talk in private," she said, her voice shaking but controlled. He didn't even turn around. She caught up to him just outside the venue, reaching for his arm, but he kept walking. She tried again, her voice louder, telling him they could fix this. He didn't even turn around. I knew I had to go after him. The second I stepped outside, I spotted him down the street, already halfway to a bar with Mike and a few of his closest friends. I caught up just as they stepped inside, the heavy wooden door slamming shut behind them. By the next morning, the wedding had turned into the only thing anyone in the family was talking about. Family group chats were blowing up non-stop, messages pouring in faster than anyone could keep up with. Some people were fully on Ethan's side, saying he dodged a disaster before it was too late. Others thought Mike had gone too far by exposing the affair so publicly, arguing that there was a better way to handle it. That opinion wasn't very popular, though. Most agreed that the truth needed to come out. Jessica wasn't wasting any time. Less than 24 hours after walking out of the reception, she made it clear where she stood. Her social media had been wiped of any trace of Brandon, and in its place she posted a single update: filed for divorce. The process would take time, but there was no doubt her marriage was over. Some people are nothing but liars and cowards. That was all it took for the comments to flood in. Support from her friends, outrage from people who had no idea what had happened, and just enough vague responses from those who did know to stir up more curiosity. Sarah was also in full damage control mode. A long emotional message was sent to Ethan's phone, paragraphs of pleading, explanations, and promises that they could fix this. Ethan never responded. He didn't even open it. Sarah's number was blocked before she could try again. Her parents, on the other hand, took a more direct approach. They reached out to Ethan's family, apologizing over and over, offering to cover every last cent of the wedding costs. It was obvious they wanted to salvage some level of dignity after everything their daughter had done. Ethan's parents didn't give them much of a response, just a short acknowledgement before cutting the conversation off. There wasn't anything left to discuss. Then Ethan made his first and only public statement, a single sentence posted on his social media: "Dodged a bullet. Thanks, Mike." That was it. No dramatic breakdown, no over-explaining, just that, and that one sentence went everywhere. People from the wedding started sharing it. Old friends from high school started commenting. Even people who weren't there were asking, "Wait, what happened?" And the ones who did know were more than happy to fill them in. Suddenly everyone knew about the wedding that had gone down in flames. Mike, meanwhile, was getting flooded with messages. Some from people thanking him, others from people who thought he was brutal but honest. His response: a simple no regrets. At every bar they went to that weekend, someone offered to buy him a drink. He had basically become a legend overnight. Brandon, on the other hand, disappeared completely. His social media accounts were deactivated within hours of Jessica's post, and mutual friends said he wasn't responding to texts. Someone heard that Jessica had already kicked him out of their house, and he was couch surfing at a buddy's place. No one felt bad for him. Sarah wasn't handling things well either. Word got around that she had a full breakdown at her parents' house, screaming about how everyone ruined her life and how she deserved happiness. Her friends were split, some stuck by her, while others slowly distanced themselves, realizing that being connected to her wasn't exactly a good look right now. And then another bomb dropped. A mutual friend let it slip that Sarah's affair with Brandon wasn't even the full story. There were rumors about her having an emotional affair with a coworker months ago. At this point, no one was surprised. Ethan wasn't sticking around to deal with any more of the fallout. He took a break from work, packed his bags, and went on a trip with Mike and a few close friends. A much-needed escape. Sarah's family wasn't coming out of this unscathed either. Some of her extended relatives started distancing themselves out of sheer embarrassment. Her aunts and uncles, who had been so vocal at the wedding, suddenly had nothing to say. A few even reached out to Ethan's family, making it clear they did not condone Sarah's actions. Even the wedding vendors were pissed. The reception was supposed to go on for hours, with drinks flowing and food being served. Instead, half the guests left immediately, and the rest just awkwardly picked at their meals before making an excuse to head out. The caterers, decorators, and photographers all expected to be paid for their full services, and now Sarah's parents were stuck with the bill for a wedding that never even made it to the first dance. The last time I saw Mike before they left for their trip, I asked him if he regretted anything, if he ever second-guessed the way he handled things. He just looked at me, completely unfazed, and said, "Not a damn thing." Jessica, meanwhile, wasn't wallowing. She was already making moves. Her divorce was happening, but she wasn't about to let this destroy her. She started posting more confident pictures, out with friends, smiling like she had finally been freed from something she didn't even realize was weighing her down, and the support she got: overwhelming. Ethan was a different story. He wasn't the type to post every detail of his life, but the updates that came through from his trip showed him relaxed, laughing, like the weight had finally lifted off his shoulders. He was healing, slowly but surely. As for whether he'd ever trust love again, that was something only time could tell. But for now, he was free. By the time the weekend was over, the wedding disaster had spread like wildfire beyond just family and close friends. Social media was full of vague but dramatic status updates from guests, all hinting at the chaos that went down. One cousin tweeted, "That wedding was like an episode of Maury. I'm still in shock." Another posted a cryptic message, "Some people have no shame. Imagine ruining 2 marriages on your wedding day." Naturally, people outside the guest list started asking questions. Some replied, trying to piece things together. Others started guessing. It didn't take long before the full story started leaking in pieces, and then the biggest bomb dropped. Someone at the wedding had recorded Mike's speech, not just a small clip. The whole thing, from the moment he started to his final words before dropping the mic. And that video, it was now online. The video that broke the internet, well, at least our circles. The video started circulating in private group chats first, then made its way to Reddit, Facebook, even TikTok. The caption was simple: "Best man speech turns wedding into a crime scene." Not literally, but almost. Comments poured in. Some people praised Mike, saying he did the right thing by exposing Sarah. Others debated whether he should have done it in private. And of course, some people were just there for the drama, eating up every second of it. The best part, Sarah's defenders couldn't keep up. A few of her friends tried jumping into comment sections, claiming Ethan wasn't perfect either. But the second they were asked for proof, they had nothing. No receipts, no examples, just vague, empty excuses. They couldn't spin the narrative because the video spoke for itself. Sarah had betrayed Ethan, Brandon had betrayed Jessica, and now the whole world knew. Somewhere in the middle of all this, Brandon must have realized that he looked just as bad as Sarah, if not worse. So he did what every guilty person does way too late. He sent Ethan a pathetic text. "I never meant for things to go this far. I'm sorry, man." No real apology, no accountability, just damage control. Ethan didn't even reply. Blocked. If there was one person who wasn't going to let this slide, it was Jessica. The day after the video went viral, she posted a brutal statement. "Imagine throwing away your marriage, your friendships, and your entire reputation for a cheap, pathetic affair. Some people are just cowards who destroy everything around them. But hey, at least now I know what kind of trash I was married to." Divorce papers are coming. The reaction, massive support. People flooded her comments with encouragement. Old friends reached out, some even admitting they had suspected Brandon was cheating but never had proof. Jessica wasn't just moving on, she was healing. Slowly but surely, she started finding herself again, hitting the gym, reconnecting with old friends, and focusing on her own happiness. Before she could make things difficult, he arranged a day to move out. While she wasn't there, he packed his things, took what was his, and left behind anything tied to their relationship. He wasn't giving her a single chance to manipulate him, but that didn't stop Sarah from trying. Once she realized he was gone, she flooded his phone with messages. Calls, texts, long, desperate voicemails. Blocked. Then, her parents stepped in. Sarah's mother called Ethan's mom, sobbing. She begged for Ethan to talk to Sarah, saying their daughter was ostracized, not eating, crying all the time. Ethan's mom? No sympathy. Her only response was, maybe she should have thought about that before ruining her own wedding. Then she hung up. Sarah's attempts to control the situation had failed. With the video making rounds, it wasn't just friends and family watching. Some podcasts and small media outlets got wind of the drama and reached out. One even offered Mike an interview. His response, a hard pass. "I said what needed to be said," was all he told us. The guy had nothing left to prove. As the dust settled, more ugly truths surfaced. Turns out, Sarah's friends knew. Not all of them, but enough to make it clear this wasn't just a mistake. This was a long-running secret that some people helped cover up. Then another bombshell hit. A cousin casually mentioned that Sarah had also been emotionally involved with an ex while dating Ethan. It wasn't clear if it was physical, but it was enough to raise eyebrows. Sarah had never been loyal. Not long after all this, Sarah made a quiet update to her LinkedIn profile. Open to work. No one knew if she lost her job, but it wouldn't be surprising. Her reputation had taken a hit. People talk, especially in professional circles. Meanwhile, Jessica made things official. She filed for divorce and ensured that Brandon's infidelity was documented. It wasn't just about ending the marriage, it was about making sure he didn't walk away clean. In a final, pathetic attempt at damage control, Brandon started telling mutual friends that Jessica was never happy in their marriage. It backfired instantly. People laughed. No one bought it. Jessica had always supported him. She was the one who tried to make things work. The problem was him. After everything, Ethan's family threw a small party to cheer him up. It wasn't anything huge, just a gathering of close family and friends. Good food, good drinks. Someone even joked, "Mike deserves a medal." Ethan laughed. For the first time since the disaster, he actually looked free. Sarah and Brandon's lives were falling apart. Meanwhile, Ethan and Jessica were moving forward. It didn't take long for Sarah to make her next move. A few days after Ethan had completely cut her off, she showed up unannounced at his parents' house. No warning, no text, just stood at their front door, looking like a wreck. She had clearly been crying, makeup smudged, hair pulled into a messy bun, still wearing the engagement ring Ethan had thrown away. Ethan wasn't home, but his dad was. She started begging for a conversation, pleading for another chance, but Ethan's dad wasn't having it. He stood firm, blocking the doorway, arms crossed. Sarah didn't take the hint. She kept talking, voice cracking, rambling about how they could fix things, how she made a mistake, how she still loved Ethan. Ethan's dad finally spoke. Short, blunt, and final. "Go home, Sarah." She didn't move at first. Her hands clenched at the bottom of her sweatshirt, like she was holding herself together. Then, realizing she wasn't going to get anywhere, she slowly stepped back, tears streaming down her face. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Sarah started finding new ways to contact Ethan. New numbers, different social media accounts, even using mutual friends to pass messages along. Ethan ignored all of it, but it was relentless. At one point, he even considered a restraining order. While Sarah was spiraling, Brandon was crashing and burning in a completely different way. Jessica's lawyer was thorough. It turned out Brandon had been using their joint savings to fund his hotel stays with Sarah. Thousands of dollars had disappeared over the course of their affair, all under the excuse of business trips. Jessica's lawyer wasted no time documenting everything. Brandon was screwed. Meanwhile, Ethan and Mike were closer than ever. They had always been best friends, but after everything, Ethan told him he'd never felt more free. It was the first time in years that he wasn't walking on eggshells, trying to be the perfect fiancé for someone who had been lying to him the entire time. Sarah must have realized that no one was buying her broken-hearted victim act, so she switched tactics. She started reaching out to people, old friends, family, even acquaintances, with a half apology. Not real remorse, just vague excuses about how things were complicated, and Ethan wasn't perfect either. Nobody bought it. Then Jessica dropped another bombshell. She leaked texts showing Brandon had been planning a vow renewal while still sleeping with Sarah. The messages were brutal. Brandon talking about how much he loved Jessica, planning an expensive trip for their anniversary, all while actively sneaking around behind her back. People who had already turned on Sarah and Brandon were now completely done with them. Some of Sarah's own cousins quietly unfollowed her on social media. Even people who had originally tried defending her stopped talking. Then, just when it seemed like Sarah couldn't sink lower, her job got involved. A mutual friend let it slip that Sarah had been pressured to resign. The company she worked for had strict policies about reputation management, and with how viral her scandal had become, she was becoming a liability. Not long after, she updated her LinkedIn to open to work. Then came her desperate rebound attempt. A few people noticed Sarah had joined dating apps, but heavily edited her pictures. New angles, filters, old vacation photos, anything to make it look like she hadn't just been through the worst month of her life. But even that wasn't working. The small-town rumors had spread too far. Ethan wasn't even paying attention to any of this. He was focusing on himself. He started therapy, not because he was broken, but because he wanted to make sure he never ignored red flags again. He was actually healing. Sarah's mother wasn't happy about any of this. She started blaming Mike, whining to anyone who would listen that he should have handled things privately. Nobody agreed. People were still buying Mike drinks, joking that he was the wedding truth bomb guy. He had no regrets. Then there was Brandon's last-ditch effort. With everything falling apart, he tried to rekindle things with Jessica. He reached out, begging for a conversation, swearing he could make it up to her. Jessica laughed in his face. That was it. Completely done. Jessica's lawyer moved fast. She was getting the house. Brandon was scrambling for a place to stay. He had no savings left, thanks to all the money he had spent on his affair, and now he was out of options. Ethan had his own fresh start. He moved into a new apartment, completely changing his number. No more messages, no more calls, no more drama. Sarah and Brandon had ruined their own lives. Meanwhile, Ethan and Jessica were moving on. Jessica wasn't just moving on, she was thriving. In the weeks after filing for divorce, she completely reinvented herself. She hit the gym, started dressing sharper, and posted pictures where she radiated confidence. Friends hyped her up in the comments. Even people who barely knew her started supporting her journey. Brandon, meanwhile, was getting roasted online. Jessica's friends took petty revenge to another level. They went through his old posts, pictures of him flexing in the gym, cheesy motivational quotes, even past anniversary posts about how lucky he was to have Jessica, and they flooded them with clown emojis. Every single one. It got so bad that Brandon deleted all his social media. Sarah wasn't doing much better. She made the classic mistake of thinking that if she played the victim loud enough, people would start feeling bad for her. She posted a long dramatic rant about how she was being unfairly judged and how people were ignoring the full story. It backfired instantly. People mocked her. The comments were brutal. Some called her out directly. Others just left laughing emojis. A few even tagged Jessica, which made things even worse. Sarah deleted the post within hours. At this point, her reputation was completely ruined. Even people who weren't directly involved started distancing themselves. Friends stopped inviting her to things. Some mutuals unfollowed her quietly. It was like no one wanted to be associated with her anymore. Brandon, realizing he had zero chance of bouncing back from this, made the only move he could. He left town. A mutual friend heard that he packed up and moved out of state. No goodbye post, no dramatic exit, just gone. It was obvious he couldn't handle the humiliation. Then, months later, Sarah made one last desperate attempt to win. Out of nowhere, she posted a picture of a diamond ring on her finger with the caption, "Finally found real happiness." But this time, it wasn't a fake. She and Brandon, the man she had the affair with, had officially gotten engaged. However, people weren't impressed. Most just saw it as two cheaters clinging to each other because no one else wanted them. And when that guy found out, he went on social media and publicly denied they were engaged. I don't know why she posted that. We're not together. The post vanished within minutes. It was officially over for her. Meanwhile, Mike was still enjoying his unexpected fame. At a party, someone joked that he should officiate weddings since he had a talent for exposing the truth. The idea actually stuck. A few people seriously asked him if he would do it. Mike considered it. Ethan, on the other hand, wasn't thinking about any of it. He was too busy traveling. His social media had completely shifted. Pictures of city skylines, hikes, beachside views, he was living his best life. One day, Sarah made one final attempt to reach out. She sent him one last message. No one knows what it said because Ethan never opened it. Blocked. Jessica, meanwhile, closed the chapter completely. The day her divorce was finalized, she threw a party. Good music, drinks, her closest friends, and the best part, she posted a picture holding up her old wedding ring before flipping it off. People loved it. And Ethan, he had one final statement about everything. When someone asked him how he felt about it all, he just shrugged and said, "Best thing that ever happened to me." Looking back, it's insane how one wedding disaster ended up freeing so many people. Ethan, still processing it all, but getting better each day. Jessica, stronger than ever. Even Brandon, for all his mistakes, was forced to start over. And Sarah, she was just a cautionary tale. Sarah must have realized she had zero allies left because she made one last desperate attempt to flip the narrative. She started posting about her mental health journey, talking about how people were too weak to forgive, how she was growing from her mistakes, and how she refused to be canceled over one bad decision. No one cared. The comments? Brutal. Some people outright called her out. Others just left laughing emojis or screenshots of her fake engagement post. The worst part, even her own friends weren't defending her anymore. Her pity campaign failed instantly. While Sarah was busy embarrassing herself online, Ethan was completely ignoring it all. No cryptic posts, no responses, just silence. He hit the gym, got back into hobbies he had neglected, and kept traveling. Every few weeks, a new picture popped up. Beaches, mountains, big city skylines. He looked like someone who had completely freed himself. Then, out of nowhere, Brandon reappeared. He emailed Jessica, begging for one last conversation. It was full of empty apologies, excuses, promises that he had changed. Jessica didn't even open it. Blocked. Instead of dwelling on the past, she made the perfect revenge move. She donated her wedding dress to charity and posted a picture with the caption, "One woman's trash, another woman's treasure." It went viral instantly. People loved it. Even strangers jumped in to hype her up. It wasn't just a symbolic win. It was a final public goodbye to everything that had happened. Mike, on the other hand, was thriving in his own way. People joked that his presence alone kept relationships honest. At bars, at parties, even at weddings, someone would point at him and say, "Better not cheat. Mike might be watching." His social status skyrocketed. Sarah's family, though, completely falling apart. Her parents had started arguing over who was to blame for her downfall. Their fights had spilled into family gatherings. Some of her cousins had already distanced themselves, but now even the older family members were picking sides. While all of this was happening, Ethan's love life had quietly moved forward. One night at a bar, he ran into an old flame. They caught up, talked for hours, and left together. By the next morning, rumors were already flying. Sarah somehow found out. That's when things got even worse for her. Without Ethan's financial support, she had to move back in with her parents, the same ones who were already fighting over her mistakes. Brandon somehow managed to sink lower. After getting caught messaging Sarah on company time, he was fired. No severance, no backup plan, just gone. Then Sarah tried one last stunt. She went after one of Ethan's coworkers. She made sure to be seen with him, posting pictures just subtle enough to make it look like they were dating. Ethan didn't even acknowledge it. The coworker ghosted her within a week. Jessica, meanwhile, was enjoying the single life. No rush to settle down, no bitterness, just dating casually and thriving. Then, the ultimate cherry on top. The wedding venue where the disaster had happened posted a TikTok with the caption, "The most dramatic wedding we've ever hosted." The comments immediately knew. People started tagging Ethan, Jessica, even Mike. Someone even replied with the video of Mike's speech. It was obvious they were talking about Sarah's wedding, and they didn't even have to name her. Brandon, now completely spiraling, made one last emotional meltdown online. He posted a long dramatic rant about losing real love and how some people never appreciated what they had. No one took him seriously. Some people left clown emojis. Others just replied, "Didn't you cheat though?" He deleted the post within an hour. Then Sarah made her final move. She wrote one last desperate letter to Ethan. A long emotional message about how she had changed, how she still loved him, how they were meant to be together. Ethan didn't even read it. He handed me his phone and told me to help him craft the perfect response. Return to sender. That was it. At the time, it felt like pure chaos. But looking back, I realized something. This wasn't just a scandal. It was a blessing in disguise. Ethan, finally free. Jessica, better than ever. Even Brandon, for all his mistakes, had been forced to start over. And Sarah, she had destroyed herself. 1 year later, and everything had changed. Ethan was in the best shape of his life. He had fully embraced his new lifestyle, hiking, hitting the gym, and traveling to places he never thought he'd see. His social media was filled with pictures of mountains, oceans, and city skylines, looking like a completely different person from the guy who was almost trapped in a miserable marriage. He had even started considering a career change, something that gave him more freedom, more flexibility. He wasn't rushing into it, but he was finally thinking about his own happiness. Jessica had leveled up completely. Not only was she thriving, but she had met someone new. A respectful guy, the complete opposite of Brandon, and things were serious. They had recently moved in together, and every update she posted radiated pure happiness. No regrets, no bitterness, just moving forward. Mike's status, still legendary. He had been promoted at work, but that wasn't the most interesting part. Anytime someone introduced him, it was never just his name. "Oh, you're the guy who exposed the bride at the wedding." He had fully embraced it at this point. One bad wedding speech had made him unforgettable. Sarah, on the other hand, had completely disappeared. After failing every attempt at playing the victim, she had finally deleted all her social media. No updates, no vague quotes, no dramatic posts, just gone. The last thing anyone heard, she was still living with her parents, unemployed, completely cut off from her old social circles. Brandon was doing even worse. His career was dead. After losing his job over the affair, he had struggled to find anything stable. He burned too many bridges, and eventually, he was couch surfing at a friend's place, barely getting by. Meanwhile, Ethan's love life had revived. That old flame he reconnected with, they had been quietly dating for a few months. Nothing flashy, no rushed engagement, just taking things slow and enjoying life. Even outside of their social circles, Sarah's reputation never recovered. People she barely knew still talked about her. The wedding disaster story had spread far enough that even new people knew to stay away. She wasn't just the girl who got caught cheating. She was the girl who destroyed her own wedding. Ethan, on the other hand, had found a new level of confidence. One night, over drinks, he casually mentioned, "I'll never let someone manipulate me like that again." No bitterness, no anger, just a statement. He had truly moved on. Even the family's final verdict was clear. At a reunion, Ethan's relatives were grateful that the wedding disaster had saved him from lifelong misery. Some of them even admitted that they never liked Sarah to begin with. Then, in one last pathetic attempt at redemption, Brandon reached out to Ethan. A short message. "Hey man, I've changed. Hope you're doing well," left on read. Jessica, she had one final celebration to close the chapter. Her divorce party. She invited everyone, except Sarah and Brandon. Drinks, music, laughter, and a cake that said goodbye trash. Even Sarah's own mother had finally admitted the truth. At one point, she awkwardly told my mom, "Sarah really messed up." Understatement of the year. Then, at the family reunion, someone jokingly nudged Ethan and asked, "So thinking about proposing again?" He burst out laughing. Mike, grinning, raised his glass. "One bad year saved you from a lifetime of misery." Ethan just nodded. Looking back, the wedding disaster had changed everything. And now, no one in our circle would ever sit through a wedding speech the same way again. After a full year of radio silence, Sarah came back. No warnings, no slow buildup. Just a sudden dramatic social media comeback that made everyone stop and stare. A picture of a diamond ring on her hand. The caption, "Finding true love after heartbreak." At first, nobody could believe it. Who would actually marry Sarah after everything? Then the second bomb dropped. The groom? Brandon. The same Brandon she had an affair with at her own wedding. Jessica saw it first. Within minutes she tweeted, "LMAO, you can't make this up." And just like that, the group chats exploded. Nobody was surprised that Sarah was desperate enough to take back Brandon. But the fact that he was dumb enough to propose, that was next level stupidity. Ethan heard about it while grabbing drinks with some of us. When someone showed him the post, he just burst out laughing. Mike, sitting across from him, leaned back and said, "Damn man, you really dodged 2 bullets." Ethan just smirked and sent Mike a screenshot with one text. "Guess I dodged 2 bullets." The reactions were priceless. Sarah, of course, tried to spin the engagement as some kind of redemption arc. She started posting about how true love conquers all and how real relationships can survive anything. Nobody bought it. A few mutual friends leaked the real story. Brandon wasn't some reformed man ready to build a future with her. He was broke. He had burned too many bridges, couldn't hold down a job, and Sarah was literally the only person who still tolerated him. He didn't propose out of love. He proposed out of desperation. And Sarah, she was so starved for validation that she took him back, pretending none of the past year had happened. It didn't take long for everything to start falling apart. 1 week after their engagement announcement, Brandon got evicted from the friend's couch he was crashing on. No money, no savings, nothing. Sarah, already regretting everything. Jessica called it immediately. She looked at me and said, "They won't last a year." I agreed. Ethan's family had the best reaction. A few of his cousins started placing bets in the group chat on how long the marriage would actually last. The general consensus? 6 months tops. Ethan, meanwhile, was completely unbothered. He booked a vacation with his girlfriend and laughed, saying, while they're getting married, I'll be on a beach with someone who actually respects me. When Sarah and Brandon's wedding day finally came, it was a disaster. Even Sarah's own family hesitated to attend. Some quietly refused to show up. Others only went out of pure obligation. There was no excitement, no build-up, no one cared. And karma, it wasn't done yet. The same way Sarah's affair destroyed Ethan's and Jessica's marriages, her new relationship was already crumbling. Money problems, trust issues, whispers about Brandon messaging other women. It was only a matter of time. In the end, everything came full circle. One night, Ethan, Mike, and I met up for drinks. As we raised our glasses, Ethan just smirked. To the wedding that never was. We laughed, clinked our glasses, and toasted to the chaos. And as for Sarah and Brandon, their future was a ticking time bomb.